Julian Assange needs no introduction. The founder of WikiLeaks, he's made hundreds of thousands of previously unreleased documents available to the general public, uncovering diplomatic relations gaffes right through to human rights abuses. He's also fighting extradition to Sweden over rape allegations. Julian, thanks for talking to RT. Now, through the course of your work, it's reasonable to assume that you have some insight into how political decisions are being made. What do you make of the recent events in the Middle East and North Africa? Do you think that we're seeing genuine social unrest, or are we seeing some kind of orchestrated revolt? And if so, who do you think is behind all this?
Well, there's genuine change in some parts of the Middle East. I mean, Egypt is a clear case. I was concerned at the beginning of the Egyptian revolution as to whether we just saw a changing of the chairs and a maintenance of the same existing power structure, or whether something really different was happening. But after Mubarak fled Cairo, you saw mini revolutions occurring in every institution within Egypt, from Alexandria to Cairo. So that's a sort of change that's hard to undo. And when I saw the Amdalwa, the Egyptian secret police headquarters, abandoned, and activists come in and seize all the archives, 100,000 Egyptian secret police fled. That's a real change. Now, what's happening in some other countries is a bit different. So the situation in Libya clearly has the involvement of state actors in it from many different areas. That's something that's being driven by state actors. Now, it is normal for neighbouring countries to have interconnections with each other. The activists in different countries, families in different countries, businesses in different countries, and the states from neighbouring countries. That's normal. When outside forces from very, very far-flung countries start to take an aggressive role in a regional affair, then we have to look a bit more and say that what's going on is not normal. So what's happening in Libya, for example, is not normal. It is not merely bona fide discontent by the people. That is not to say that there is not bona fide discontent, but it is not merely that.
So do you think that there's a suggestion that this is being orchestrated from the outside, particularly in Libya?
Well, I mean, in Libya, it's been bombed daily by NATO, so that much is clear, and the rebels are being funded and trained by the UK, United States, and possibly France. So, yes, that's a difficult and dangerous situation that has developed. I mean, we can see this continual mission creep that is occurring in Libya that everyone who studies these affairs knew would occur from the moment that intervention started. So we all need to watch that situation very carefully and trying to control it. What is the end game for Libya? We can compare Libya to, say, Bahrain, where there has been similar genuine discontent with the government in Bahrain. We released over 250 cables right at that time that the discontent started in Bahrain. And I've spoken to activists in Bahrain in a very grim and precarious situation, but we don't see any effective Western response to what is happening there. And this is because we have the Fifth Fleet of the United States stationed in Bahrain, and right on the other side we have Saudi Arabia. And Saudi Arabia and Bahrain are intimately connected politically, and Saudi knows that if Bahrain falls, that movement amongst the Shia will spread in to Saudi Arabia, so that's why they've literally cut the bridge between Bahrain and Saudi Arabia and moved Saudi troops in.
Let's talk about other latest sort of WikiLeaks cables that have been released. They show the UK as a haven for extremism, with at least 35 Guantanamo detainees having at least passed through the UK. Is the UK still a haven for terrorists?
I don't know if it's still been a haven for terrorists, but it is certainly a haven for oligarchs and former regime dictators that have come here. I mean, remember the famous Pinochet trial for the extradition of Pinochet from the UK, which the Thatcher resisted, incredibly using a lawyer that is involved in trying to extradite me from the United Kingdom. Now, part of that is perhaps good. It's an example of true liberalism in the United Kingdom. Everyone come here, we'll protect you. On the other hand, there does seem to be a connect between, is it really supporting free speech activists like me who come to the UK, but on the other hand, it is supporting people like sons of Gaddafi.
And the Guantanamo information, why has WikiLeaks released it now? I mean, it seems sort of to be after the fact. Is it because Obama has recently announced his re-election campaign, and obviously closing Guantanamo was one of his main election promises?
Well, there's a number of reasons why we've released it now. The primary one is that we are a small organisation, a very committed one, and last year we came under extraordinary attack, the likes of which no media organisation outside of Al Jazeera has ever seen. And we had, and in fact have, the United States pressure, Visa, MasterCard, Bank of America, and a number of other Western finance companies to block money flows to us. We've had and have an investigation trying to charge me with espionage and other members of our staff and volunteers in the United States. All these things continue to go on, and so they really dampen down our ability to move quickly and publish quickly. On the other hand, we now have spread out to the point where we are working with over 63 media organisations around the world in pushing out the cables, and those are really making a tremendous difference from the Middle East to Peru. So we've released this information, as soon as we could, but we have also been engaging in an investigation on it with 9 media organisations, from the Washington Post to Le Monde to El País and to Der Spiegel and so on, to understand this, find the detainees and so on, and push it out. The timing is good. We see that Obama has given up on closing Guantanamo and has decided to reopen the trial process, and we now have a situation where even the Obama administration says that 48 of these people still in Guantanamo are completely innocent. Completely innocent. There's not enough information to prove that they're criminals, but they are completely innocent, and that they should be sent somewhere, and they're not being sent somewhere. So completely innocent people incarcerated for years and years and years, no trial and no hope of relief.
Is that not because there's nowhere to send them, because no country will agree to house them?
Well, no country will agree to house them, including the United States, but the United States has made them its problem. The United States was involved in rounding up these innocent people, setting up a process that was from the very beginning corrupt. There's a reason why they're in Guantanamo and not on the US mainland and not in an allied country. And that reason was to hide them and keep them outside of the law. Just like you have Caribbean islands engaged in money laundering, the United States was engaged in people laundering, taking people secretly, pushing them through black sites and taking them to Guantanamo. And that is the original sin of Guantanamo, that it was a corrupt process to evade the law, and as a result, there's innocent people there. And
the latest files that you've released show that there are Russians involved in that process as well?
Yes, we have released today 8 Russian citizens' files.
And what can you tell me about them?
I haven't read them, but I'm sure that Russian media organisations will very quickly pick them up. We can tell you that what the files say in general, because they're all the same type of file, which is a detainee assessment file assessed by US military intelligence as to what these detainees are like. And so they list the circumstances of their capture, what their health records are like, what the evidence is against them at a high level, what sources of evidence there are against them, and give a recommendation as to whether they think they are high or low risk for reoffending or for having offended in the past, and whether they should be released. And
what have you got coming out in the future? What are you looking at the moment?
So at the moment we've spent this entire week dealing with the Guantanamo release, but we have a significant release coming up in the future, but we always do.
Let's talk a little bit about you and what you're going through at the moment. You are currently fighting extradition to Sweden. What are your fears should you be extradited there?
The problem is in 2 parts. The United States is trying to get up an extradition case for me to the United States. Just today we see a new subpoena coming out of the secret grand jury that is operating in Alexandria, Virginia. It is trying to get up this espionage case against us. It is building that case, and in whatever country I am in, once it decides to indict, they will try to extradite me from that country. And possibly not just me, possibly our other staff. The other problem with the Swedish extradition is that the process itself has been corrupted. So it was corrupted from the very beginning. Within 12 hours of these original charges being filed, they were reviewed by a senior prosecutor in Sweden and dropped as not the allegations dropped as not representing any kind of crime. And a Swedish politician by the name of Claes Borgström then picked them up and went to a different prosecutor all the way out from Stockholm and Gothenburg and pushed it back up again. And we've seen corruption in the Swedish media, we've seen all sorts of strange actions in relation to how this case has progressed. And we should understand that even the allegations themselves do not include any one of these women saying no or saying that they had been raped. The Swedish politician Claes Borgström, in response to a question by the media saying, well, not even the women allege this, said famously, well, what would they know? They're not lawyers.
So if the US is trying to extradite you anyway, then surely it really doesn't matter which country you're in. They're going to go after you anyway.
Well, it does matter. I mean, it's a problem regardless of what country I'm in. But there are differences between Sweden and the United Kingdom. Now, the United Kingdom is not the best country, unfortunately, to be in. But it does have an open court process. And it has a relatively detailed court process. The problem in Sweden, although technically the law in relation to extradition would serve us better in relation to the United States, the process itself is not open, not transparent, and is very, very hard for us to deal with. In addition, a media climate has been set up in Sweden that is quite hostile. And that's an ongoing problem. We've had, for example, the Prime Minister, the Minister of Justice make attacks on me personally. Juries in Sweden, well, they don't exist. What exists is political appointees, lay jurors appointed by the political parties. And both political parties are involved in this Swedish case. The Social Democrats, which is the sort of centre-left party, has an involvement, and the right-wing party, which is now in government, has an involvement in relation to pressure from the United States. So all members of the jury, the pseudo-jury that would be covering this case, would be drawn from one of these two political parties. So it's not a situation that is neutral. It's not a country where I understand the language. The Swedish prosecution continues to break EU law by refusing to provide any documentation whatsoever in English to me. So it is a strange and hostile environment in which I cannot effectively defend myself.
What message do you think it would send to the world if the UK did turn around, almost unexpectedly at this point it seems, and refuse to extradite you?
Well, it depends on to which country. So here's the sort of calculation that's going on in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom wants to keep, at the various levels, wants to keep its good relationship with the United States. So if the UK was to reject the US extradition order, that would pose terrible problems for it. Similarly, if it was to reject the Swedish extradition order, that would pose problems for it, because it would look like it was seeking to harbour me. And this is the sort of difficult situation that Afghanistan faced, where it appeared that it was harbouring bin Laden, and as a result there was an aggressive response. So any country which appears to be harbouring us as the United States is trying to conduct its aggressive response, faces political pressures. So if the United Kingdom decided not to extradite, and there are actually some good reasons to do that, it would send a clear signal in relation to Sweden that the European arrest warrant should not be abused. Recall that I have not even been charged. Even in Sweden, I have not even been charged. So it really is a tremendous abuse of the European arrest warrant system. But the European arrest warrant system is easy to abuse. And Fair Trials International, a number of other groups, are pushing to reform that. In fact, there's a reform committee scheduled for July in the United Kingdom to try and look at reforming the arrest warrant system. If the United Kingdom does attempt to extradite me to the United States, then it faces a difficult position politically, which is the bulk of the people in the United Kingdom support us. The Liberal Democrats, which are part of the coalition of the UK government, support us. And the Conservative Party, the Tories, which form the majority of the UK government, it is not yet clear what their line is. They are a fresh government, they are a new government, so they may not have merged too much yet with the bureaucracy. But if the Liberal Democrats go this way, and the Conservative Party goes this way, and the population goes with the Liberal Democrats, then there'll be a very uneasy tension for the government. So really its only effective strategy is to get me out to Sweden as fast as possible. And we've seen that in some of the scheduling of the court dates and the appointment by the British government of the most senior extradition lawyer in the whole country, the lawyer who was involved in the Pinochet extradition, to assist in my extradition.
Let's move on and talk about, you mentioned earlier your media partners, one of which is The Guardian, with whom you're now involved in a dispute, but you chose them as your primary English language partner for distributing the WikiLeaks cables. But they appear to have drastically edited those cables, particularly in relation to how gas companies, British gas companies, operate abroad. And now Guardian journalists have published this book on WikiLeaks, which you say is an attack on you. How would you describe, following that, The Guardian's stance on whistleblowing and media freedom in general?
Well, they have a mixed opinion on that. You know, they are a publishing organisation, so of course they want as much right for them to publish as possible. That's a natural self-interest. What they have done with this cable cooking, in this incredible redaction, over-redaction of cables. We saw a case for Bulgarian organised crime where they redacted all the figures in Bulgarian organised crime, something very important for the Bulgarian people to know about, is they have pushed the right of the people to know at the very, very edge. And what they're concerned about is any possible attack on them by these organised crime figures, by oligarchs and politicians in Kazakhstan, etc., etc. And so they want to completely minimise any conflict by redacting the names of all those people. I mean, we even saw a case in Kazakhstan where they redacted the name of an Italian company that was purported to be corrupt. The US ambassador was writing corrupt. Redacted even that a number of members of the Kazakhstan elite was corrupt, without actually the individual names, just that fact that a number of members in the Kazakhstan elite were corrupt. But we have seen this sort of abuse of the material that we have provided several times. And the Guardian is the worst offender, but we saw it also by the New York Times. The New York Times redacted a 62-page cable down to 2 paragraphs. And this is completely against the agreement that we originally set up with them on November the 1st last year. That agreement was that the only redactions that should take place are to protect people's lives. There should be no other redaction, not to protect reputation, not to protect the Guardian's profits, but only to protect lives. And so that's a corruption of their agreement that they tried to feed this material back. But we can compare it, and so we have an ongoing research project to discover all the ways in which the New York Times and Guardian have abused that process and taken things from the public that rightfully they should know.
But why would you not then just cut out the middleman and publish the cables yourself? I mean, surely you want to have ultimate control over what goes out. Why wouldn't you just do it yourself?
We have to understand the scale of this release of information. So if we took these cables and we printed them out end to end, they would go between St. Petersburg and Moscow. It is that much material. So to actually get through it does require us to bring in the capacities of a lot of other organisations. And we've now built up a network of over 63 different media organisations from around the world, and NGOs like Amnesty, Greenpeace and Global Witness to get through this material.
The Guardian, despite portraying itself as a sort of bastion of free speech and information freedom, do you think it's allowed itself to be influenced by state interests here?
What happens in the West is that there is no border between state interest and commercial interest. The edges of the state, as a result of privatisation, are fuzzed and blurred out into the edges of companies. So in traditional societies, you have companies and you have the state, and they are distinctly different entities. But in the West, which is has the most advanced financial flows and communications flows, these have blurred out into each other. So you can't tell the boundaries between one and the other. So you see in the West, the court system are being hijacked by corporate entities to deploy police to seize assets. So that's an example of the control of the most important elements of the state, the ability to deploy coercive force by corporate interests. And so when you look at how the Guardian behaves or how the New York Times behaves, it is part of that mesh of corporate and state interests, seamlessly blurring into each other. The Guardian's concerned predominantly about being criticised by these powerful interests, about lawsuits occurring against it, driven by oligarchs, driven by people powerful enough to push a court case forward.